Hey guys, welcome into another episode of From the Wing. I am Christian Clark, the Pelicans beat writer for NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. We're about a month away from the draft. The first round is on June 26th. The second round is on June 27th. The NBA has decided we're going to split these two rounds up this year. Right now, the Pelicans don't even have a second round pick. Maybe that changes in the next month. They hold the 17th and the 21st selections. The 17th pick is that Lakers pick from the Anthony Davis trade. The Pelicans have until Saturday to decide to keep that this year or defer it until 2025. Been saying for weeks on the show, and it's just been kind of everywhere. The likely decision is that the Pelicans will defer the pick until 2025, but there is nothing official on that yet. And hey, maybe the Pelicans wait until 11:58 p.m. on Saturday to kind of screw with the Lakers and just keep them guessing, just keep them guessing.
I mean, they should, right? Like what fun is this if you don't wait till the absolute last minute to let them know what they can do with their own pick? This honestly doesn't change much because even if we choose to defer, which is the likely thing, if the Lakers include that in a trade, they're including draft rights to the player that they select in a deal. So, it messes with them, but it doesn't really mess with them. The only thing it messes with is like if they think there's even an iota that they get to keep 2025. I think people are much higher on that in that class. Like I think people believe in the talent of that class a hell of a lot more. So that's just like a more tantalizing piece to trade for them or to involve in a deal for them. So there's that. But there's dynamics. There's so many quotes out there now and so many different things you can point to compare this class to next year's class. Like I watched this crazy wing size guard. I watched this whole highlight reel, and Jonathan Givony's like, this guy's battling to be a top 5 pick in next year's class. This kid was like dribbling all over guys and shooting in their face. Like he completely outclassed like any guard in this year's draft, and he's big. And that guy's like fighting for top 5. And like obviously there's Cooper Flagg and others. Yeah, it's a down.
I mean, I know it's still early. I mean, if you were just starting a franchise from scratch, who would you take with the number 1 pick this year?
If you're starting from scratch, I think you have to take Sarr because of like the athletic promise of everything he could be, but he's so far off on all of it. But the athletic profile is phenomenal. Like if you watch a couple of the reps where everything goes perfect, he's like a 7-footer who's pirouetting with great touch and agility. Like, and you could just see little snapshots of all of that working. You just have no idea if it's ever going to all come together or not. But he is the most gifted, like athletic profile of player in this draft. It just, I think he's the only one that's like athletically separated, and you don't have much else to compare to.
Yeah, this is a really weird year. I am going in with the assumption right now that the Pelicans will only have number 21 on June 26th. I mean, a lot could change between now and then, but we're going to discuss some guys who could potentially be options at that 21st slot. All of these guys that we picked out are bigs. We're just going to focus on bigs today, and we might do a show next week, the week after that, focus on some wings, some guards. But we're just going to hit the bigs today, and then at the end of the show, we're going to talk about the wrap up of this Saints and Pelicans versus the LSED saga. It's kind of done for now. It's a story that is probably not done, as we move along, but it was kind of like a natural stopping point before Memorial Day. I think it was like just a really interesting 72-hour news cycle, and like a lot of big news dropped right before Memorial Day weekend when I'm sure people were not looking at their phones or anything like that. But let's get into some of these bigs. We just came up with a list of like 5 dudes we wanted to talk about today. I'll start with this guy, and then we can go to Ware, who I think is your guy, maybe. Yves Missi, one and done from Baylor. Grew up in Cameroon, born in Belgium. Maybe I had that backwards, but Cameroonian background. A guy who is an incredible athlete for like a true center. His vertical was more than 38 inches at the combine. I think he moves really well in space. He blocks shots that's like, whoa. Like he had put back dunks on tape that was like, whoa. I think he has a chance to be like special on the defensive end, offensively, a guy who kind of needs to be like spoon fed at this point. I mean, I think he's like a name you're going to see the Pelicans linked to in the next few weeks is like, oh, maybe this guy's a possibility.
Yeah, so we just talked about SAR and athletic profile, and in this draft is made up of incomplete basketball players and guys with bad athletic profiles that are good at basketball. It's a lot of very flawed guys, and if you look at like athletic upside, Yves Missi is like he's the next, well, he's like arguably the next best guy athletically after SAR. Like he's huge, he flies, he's muscular. It's like, and when you see him do stuff on offense at Baylor, like it's freak show stuff. But it's also very clear, like there's a little bit of like Bambi on ice in terms of knowledge of basketball. He's just kind of flying around athletically, overpowering guys at the college level.
He gets the Clint
Offensively, it's fun.
Capella. He gets the Clint Capella comp a lot. If like, assuming he develops, and he just may never. I mean, like people in the NBA are like, well, he could. He's a guy who's definitely going to need seasoning in the G League, and development is weird, and people are often wrong. But like that's the comp people throw around. It's like Clint Capella if he actually develops.
That's interesting to me because he feels a little more athletic than Capella. Maybe I'm remembering Capella coming into the league wrong because I think of what he is now. And I guess Capella is still more athletic than I give him credit for. Missi feels like a better like rim runner than Capella is. But all that being said, Missi has like no idea how to play defense right now. That's part, like the big part of the project is figuring out that side. I think that's going to come for a lot of these dudes because playing defense in college is just not the same. There's only a couple of programs that like teach defense well enough to translate early. And, that is one of them, but he didn't display a lot of that. And the offense stuff was a lot of like dunks and stuff. The intriguing thing with him, though, if you watch some of these games, is there's a few times where he'll put it on the deck himself from the 3-point line and drive to the rim and spin and lay it up. And that's the athletic thing with him. If he could do that already, if he already flashes that, that's pretty wild. I think for the Pelicans, the thing that I'm looking at here, that's going to kind of be a theme of like how I talk about the people we talk about. It feels like the Pelicans need output from this draft pick as part of their depth at the center position, given what we're running into. And I think that makes Missi a little difficult because the putting the pressure of him like needing to produce anything in year one seems like a lot. And that's going to seem like a lot for a few of these guys. So it'll be interesting to talk about.
Why does Missi look raw? Because he started playing organized basketball like 3 years ago. That's
Right.
if you listen to any of his games, they're saying on the broadcast, like Missi didn't start playing. I think he just turned 20. I mean, he basically didn't start playing organized basketball till 16, 17 years old. So he's one of those guys. And, whenever you hear that makes you think, okay, there might be untapped potential there, like late bloomer potential. That's what I think when I hear that type of stuff. And, like with big guys, does he like basketball? I think that's a big part of it because I think just a lot of big guys don't. They just do it because they're tall and they're good at it. And I think generally, like from what I saw from him, he has a pretty good motor. That seems like a positive indicator to me. Like he seems like he just generally plays pretty hard. He didn't play that much. I mean, he played like a little more than 20 minutes per game at Baylor. So yeah, there's a lot of room for growth. But I am really intrigued by like kind of the flashes that were on tape.
The flashes are crazy for having that little experience, specifically the dribbling. Like the idea that the dude, like maybe because he just doesn't know any better, is like, I'm going to drive on this closeout and I'm going to spin to the rim. Because of what this draft is, I've seen the mocks are all over the place after like the top 3 guys. Like it's really it's all a mess, right? Nobody knows where anybody's going. I feel like he's going to climb well above where the Pelicans are just because like the athletic potential and the betting on the future development. I think there's a lot of teams that pick before us that have like that timeline in mind and can invest in a guy and wait. I think he is like a prime candidate to be gone before we get there, because there are no character issues, because there is like this untapped potential, and he's already flashed crazy stuff for not playing basketball.
This is a little bit of a tangent, but the Pelicans had interest in Derek Lively last year. He came in for a workout. I think they even took him out to dinner. I mean, this isn't one of those things that's like a guy was good and then people are like, "Oh my gosh, we love this guy." Like, I mean, maybe there is a little bit of that, but I think they had legitimate interest in this guy. And like, if he was at 14, I think there's a pretty good chance they would have taken him. I liked Lively as a prospect. I remember watching that game he had against North Carolina Duke, where he had like 7 or 8 blocks. I was like, oh my god, this guy's huge. He blocks everything. I liked him. I am shocked that he is doing this as a rookie and has been this valuable for Dallas. I mean, how much of this is perfect situation playing next to like the one of the most genius pick and roll players in Luka Doncic that we've ever had in the NBA, and just him being ahead of schedule?
I mean, it's both, right? Like, so Dallas comes into this year needing to hit on all of the fringes at the same time. Their front court depth is terrible. They're going to need minutes from Lively right out the gate. And he starts off the year like very similar to like Case and Wallace and OKC, but with way more pressure. He gets to start, and, you know, starts getting these reps and pick and roll stuff. And for the most part, it is catching lobs and stuff like that. And it's a very simple role, but he also grew into and beyond that role over the course of the season. He's just never been uncomfortable in Dallas. And then I think bringing in the support of Gafford and PJ Washington took the rest of the pressure off for like what his growth needed to be. He's just been himself the entire time. The role, they made the world around him work even more with that trade. Now, given that they did hit on all of the fringes, the question after this year, especially if they don't win the title, which I think people are starting to look at them as like title favorites, if they don't win this year, a lot of their improvement next year with what assets are available, what cap is available to them, is going to be tethered to how much more Lively becomes in year 2. So it's going to be really interesting to watch. Like, does he get to continue this very smooth, great trajectory, or does it get bumpy from here?
Yeah, I mean, already like a great just finisher of those Luka lobs and other people's lobs. Defensively, like kind of a monster already, enormous, like knows how to be in the right position, good understanding of verticality. I think the thing that surprised me is he can really pass. Like, they find him on the pick and roll and like he's making good decisions and he's whipping pretty good passes. Like, just a pretty advanced player for a 20-year-old one and done giant. He's been extremely impressive in the playoffs. I mean, not starting for Dallas, but I think their best big during this playoff run.
Yeah, he's been awesome. I didn't want Dallas to hit on all the fringes, and they did, including Lively. Though I remember the mocks, like you're talking about Pelicans liking him. A lot of the mocks, if he fell past like the 10-11 area, a lot of mocks had him coming to us. So I think there's probably some sourcing in there that had people thinking that. So, you know, woulda, coulda, shoulda, though. You know, Tyrese Halliburton too. Like, woulda, coulda, shoulda.
All right, let's talk about your guy, Kel'el Ware. He spent 1 year at Oregon. That year did not go well. He then transferred to Indiana. That went better. What, is it fair to describe him as your guy? Is that accurate?
I mean, he's not the guy that I think they'll pick, but I think he is like what he is right now. I think projects to what the Pelicans like value next to Zion pretty much as someone could. I think of the guys that are going to be in this range, he is the closest to a prototype of what you'd want next to Zion. And that stuff at Indiana is real right now. You know, he's long, he's athletic. He has, you know, there are some ball handling, you know, turnovers and stuff, like lack of polish in his moves around the rim. But he has real height. He rebounds well. The biggest thing is he has a real jump shot. He has a tangible jump shot. It looks great. It looks like a small forward's jump shot. So he looks like the spacing big that does a little bit of everything. The only concern I would have with him is like, he is not somebody they went to for like true like volume scoring or anything. Like, he kind of is He's like Miles Turner-y. And but that's okay. Like, I would love to have Miles Turner today. So yeah, it's really the question mark for me is just like, what can you find out about what that year at Oregon was? And like, to your point about, do you love basketball? Do you think he does? Do you think he'll be different around like a real athletic, like alpha in Zion? And there's definitely been some stuff out there, and a lot of like, you listen to any of like the scouting podcasts that talk about scouting or anything, there's been stuff around him personality wise for a really long time. It's still being talked about. So who knows, like he might get bumped down the board just because of the Oregon stuff, because of like canceling the visits at Alabama and all that before going to Indiana. But the Indiana stuff looked good.
Kel'el Ware is 7 feet tall. He has a 9'5" standing reach, and he has a 36-inch vertical. This is also a guy who shot above 40% from three last year, but on extremely low volume. It was like 1.3 attempts. I mean, very big, athletic. To your point earlier, the shot does look nice. Like the 3-point shot looks fluid for a guy that big. He'll even hit like these kind of turnaround shots and like hook shots around the basket where he just looks very dexterous. I don't even know if that's a word. He looks
Yeah.
very coordinated. It's like, wow, you're extremely coordinated for a guy this tall. That's very uncommon. But yeah, that's the questions are definitely out there of just like, is he going to be, driven to get better every single day? I read this old interview with his high school coach where his high school coach goes on the record and he basically explained to Ware, he's like, hey, like if you like take this seriously and want this, you can make a ton of money for your family. He's like, that's what I told him. So like that stuff exists. But also these guys are so young and they're not finished products either. And it's like, this is not like a perfect analogy or anything, but I remember all the stuff about like Anthony Edwards, and it's like Anthony
Yes.
Edwards is
Does he?
unserious,
Yeah.
and like he kind of was, but also he was like still a kid, and he's still 22 years old, but like clearly a lot of that stuff was maybe not overblown, but people didn't see that like, okay, he is a little like unserious in some ways, but like there is greatness in there and you can extract it if you know how to reach him in the right way. So I think it's like fair that these questions are being asked, and that's the team's jobs.
Right.
Can this thing exists, but can we work around it? And these people are 19, 20, 21 years old. They're young men, they're not even like really men yet. And how will he change over time?
And you've always been the number one where you are. This will be a change in dynamic. Like you would be coming here to be on Zion's team. And I think that is a different dynamic that you're coming into this year. And like you said, it's young kids. It's, for everything this year, there's not stuff coming out of Indiana saying he's terrible. It's the stuff from before still being talked about. So Indiana looked really good. And I think at this point in the draft, especially, like we're talking about outside of the lottery, we're talking about a draft where nobody's super high on high end talent. This guy looks like someone who could end up having a higher end result than a lot of guys that are going to get taken before him. So if he got here because of stuff at Oregon and quotes from his high school coach, and you feel okay about him or you feel like you want to work with him, take the shot, because I can argue that he's the best bet here at this point if he's still there at 21.
Yeah, and Anthony Edwards is one side of the coin, and I mean Jackson Hayes is kind of the other side of the coin, right? It's like this guy, I mean, he is incredibly bouncy. And, one thing I always thought it was amazing about Jackson, this might sound weird, very flexible. Like he was almost like a gymnast in the way he contorted his body for a guy who was 6'11", like a guy who has all the natural talent, but just does not understand how to play basketball. And just, he doesn't take it very seriously too. So you have to decide, well, is this guy an Anthony Edwards and he can just, this stuff isn't that real, or is he a Jackson Hayes and this is just going to be who he is for many years?
Speaking of, back to Derek Lively, you saw Twitter calling Derek Lively during these playoffs, calling him Sideshow Lob. It hurt. It hurt my heart a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he's who you wanted Jackson Hayes to be, right? That was kind of the
Uh,
vision from the Pelicans front office when they took Zion number 1, and then 7 spots later, they took Jackson Hayes number 8. It's like, we're gonna have this ultra athletic front court. I like the idea, it's just the execution didn't work out.
Yep. And like, to Ware's credit, the jumper is already there and it's real. It's not a thing we think he might be able to do. It's, is it better than it already is? And it already looks pretty good.
All right, next guy on our list, another Duke guy, Kyle Filipowski. I am not that much of a Filipowski guy.
We need to disagree on some stuff here, man.
I just don't see it. I think my thing with him is when I watch his game, I'm like, to be something at the next level, you are going to have to reliably space the floor. And I don't have that much confidence that he's going to be able to do that. I just don't have a ton of confidence in his jumper. And I think he's going to be a guy who is going to need to make jumpers to be successful at the next level.
Yeah, like he's written in all your draft profiles and stuff as power forward center, and he's really like an outside wing who just connects. And I don't know that that's helpful for us. Like, it really depends on like how the Pelicans envision being flexible at the 5 and what they want it to be. But I don't see him matching up with like their ideals for what needs to be next to Zion, because you're turning the 5 kind of into a wing at that point, or you're putting in a wingy power forward in there and saying that's your front court. It's a little strange of a fit. And I think this is why like Filipowski's kind of all over the place. He was a high-end recruit and a big name, and it's Duke. So you'll see him like fly up in a mock somewhere as high as like 10 or 11. I think I don't know how to say the French guy, Tidon Salone or whatever.
I'm not even going to attempt it.
Yeah, him and Cody Williams and like Dalton Connect, like those guys are going to go before Filipowski. I think there's just better athletic. That's the other thing too, is like he doesn't have this major athletic profile and the shooting's not killer. So what are you betting on with him? And just being the dude that signed with Duke is not enough. That
Yeah, I mean,
doesn't
you're
mean
betting
you're
on
better.
a guy who is, what is he, 6'11", who
Yeah, he's huge.
plays hard. If you throw it to him when he's rolling to the basket, he can pass it a little bit. There's a little bit of connection ability. I mean, it's mainly like effort and connection ability and the idea of a jump shot. I mean, you just have to believe that his jump shot is going to translate to the next level. He was 72% free throw shooter in college, 31% from 3. He went 35% from 3 his second season and about 3 attempts per game. So like, okay. I just don't watch him shoot and I'm like, yeah, I feel great about this. That's just my main hang up. That's my just gut reaction watching him a little bit.
I just think if you compare him to anybody he's around in the draft area where he is, there's a reason to take the other guy. And I think he's going to keep losing that battle against every one of these names. Like, you feel better about upside, you feel better about athleticism, or you feel better about shooting in pretty much every pairing that I compare him to in this realm, like from 12 all the way to like 23. It's hard to be like, I just don't know where you take the bet. And somebody will. Like, somebody will go profile and coach well at Duke and, back to like what he did in high school and say that that's worth betting on. Somebody will do it, but it feels like he's a candidate to be taken later, I think, than a lot of the early mocks had him going.
All right, next guy on our list, DaRon Holmes, incredibly productive college player. He played 3 seasons at Dayton. He was a second-team All-American last year as a junior. About 20 points per game, almost 9 rebounds, a little more than 2 blocks. He was a guy who showed a ton of improvement as a 3-point shooter throughout his college career. When I went through, like, just looked at his 3-point totals, this reminded me of Herb a little bit. He made 1 3 as a freshman, 6 threes as a sophomore, and then 32 as a junior. He's kind of this guy where he started out as basically just a non 3-point shooter, not a guy you could rely on at all, to a passable one. And I think the thing scouts wonder is, how will the outside shot translate? That's definitely not all, like, he's got a lot more stuff to his game than that. I mean, he's a little bit older you kind of see him all over the place in mock drafts, but a guy I think is really interesting.
So if you want to assign a guy to me, I'll take him. If you want to call somebody my guy, this is the guy I'll call my guy. And it's for a couple of reasons. I think he's the best basketball player of anybody in this realm. And I know I've seen mocks have him in the second round at like the 35th pick. I've seen him as high as like 20 or 21. Rarely do I see him higher than that. It's a lot of like late 20s, early 30s stuff. But that's also usually where people get stuff wrong. And then we start talking about like who was a home run, like sleeper pick and stuff like that. Similar things tend to happen to small school kids and tend to happen to guys that are older. So I think this is just the best basketball player. I think DaRon Holmes he's a little smaller than the other guys, but the polish on both ends, and especially like, I know people don't want to hear about defense as much, but this dude, like from a blocking perspective, he's not like this athletic freak, but he knows so well where he is around the rim that he will let you get into a space where he can close the door on you. And he will backspin off the guy he's covering in to help and shut you down on the far end of the rim. And there's just a high end level of polish in like sealing off in the post, baiting guys into places he can get to block your shot. He can absolutely switch as a defender. And then like the thing this year is like, to the point about having the 3-pointer, he pulled out his jumper a lot this year in a way that he didn't in prior years from the mid-range as well. So I just think like of these guys, and to the debate earlier of like, do they need to get output from this pick? I feel like that guy's going to be a good basketball player, and I feel like he's going to do something for you this year. I feel like that's the guy of all these guys, the one that I would bet on the most that could make a difference in your rotation this year.
Draft is so hard, man, because you look at 2019, the Pelicans took Nickeil Alexander-Walker 17th overall, and he just didn't take right away. I mean, he did interesting stuff. He was more, I think, offensively focused than defensively focused. He changes teams a couple times. He kind of realizes what he needs to be to make it in the NBA. And this version of Nickeil Alexander-Walker that exists now is a guy I would kill to have on the Pelicans. He'd be a fantastic role guy on the Pelicans. You could use him as a starter at times, your 6th or 7th man or whatever. And, when he played on the Pelicans, I hated the way he played. I was like, man, this guy's just like launching dumb jumpers all the time. Environment matters. Pelicans had 3 head coaches in 3 years. So like Pelicans have to do their part to create a stable environment for these guys to come into. But like even guys who are good young players, just because you draft them, it doesn't mean they'll be good for you. That's what makes all of this so hard.
Yeah, I just think for Holmes, I just think the floor is really high, and I just think he's really good at basketball. And I'm looking at this draft specifically. There's a lot of these dudes. This is going to be a weird draft where like 2 or 3 of these guys end up being all-stars one day, and they're going to be from all over the map. It could be Sar. Sar may completely flame out. We have no idea. And I think that's some of the quotes have been like, it's like starting, like if it's a regular draft, it's like starting at the 12th pick. It's like starting at the 10th pick. There is no sure thing anywhere. So when we're around this pick and I just look at our predicament at the center position, some part of me just keeps getting pulled back to Holmes, because if the biggest question is, well, this output happened at Dayton, well, that's kind of the big question for everybody is, does this translate? So if the biggest question is, does it translate, and he's this smart now, I feel like he's just like one among the best bets. Like I do think Ware stylistically and athletically, like he's more the upside play. I don't think Holmes is as much the upside play. He may very well end up being like a career rotation big. That's possible. But that's possible for any of these guys. I just think more than ever, there's going to be a lot of misses in this draft. There's going to be a lot of dudes that are just rotation players, and that is the upside. I think it's okay in this realm to be like, to find the guy that is just rotation guy, especially in this draft, feels like that's a success.
I mean, look, we know the Pelicans do not shy away from taking experienced college players and going out and get those guys. Herb Jones, 4-year college player. Jose Alvarado, 4-year college player. No, Jose Alvarado was undrafted, but They have had success bringing guys into the program who
Program.
who were upperclassmen in college. It wouldn't shock me. Holmes's range, like when you just look around at the mocks, is kind of it's all over the place. Like I see a lot of late first rounds, and then I looked at Gavoni's DSPN, and Gavoni had him like 50. So I don't know where he's going to go.
Gavoni also says Bronny's good. So, and rising. And yeah. I'm struggling with that.
What are your quick Bronny takes? And don't be mean. Don't be mean. He's he's like a 19-year-old kid. Oh
it's
my
not
gosh.
even. No, I mean, I'm a terrible person. Look, I hate that they're doing this to him. I wish he was going to be playing college basketball or just like doing his own thing with less of this like enormous spotlight pointed at him. I don't think any of this is in his best interest. But that being said, he is seemingly going to go in the first round to somebody based on everything that we're hearing. And it seems like a lot of it is just like a lot of circling the wagons for legitimizing when the Lakers are the ones that do it. And it's just really weird because as a basketball player, if you remove his name, Bronny James, the closest equivalent because of his size, his role, what he projects to be in the NBA, like you hope he's Davion Mitchell. Like that's the prayer. And Davion Mitchell won a national championship, was the best player on his team during that national championship with a million clutch moments. Bronny hasn't done any of those things, was on a terrible USC team and cannot dribble. So yeah, there's just a lot of talk about a guy that's LeBron James' son. And I think one day he might be a like rotation, like point of attack defender. And I think the most important thing in the world for him is to develop a handle, but it's not there and the creation's not there. And it's just really, really hard to survive in the NBA if you're that small and can't do the true point of attack guard stuff really, really well. But he's athletic. It's possible. It might work. It's weird.
The best case scenarios feel like Davion Mitchell. It feels like Gary Harris, absolute best case scenario where Gary Harris is kind of small for like a shooting guard, not a guy who's initiating your offense at all. He's going to guard. He's going to hit some catch and shoot threes. Like that feels like the absolute best case scenario. I watched Bronny's whole interview that he did at the pre-draft combine. And I wasn't, and look, I know like guys get coached up and like it's a kind of a performance in some ways, but I was kind of impressed. Like Bronny's message was, I want to be my own man. And like my feeling coming away watching that was, it seemed like he did not love that LeBron said, like, I want to play with my son. Like Bronny seems to like want to get out there and do it on his own. It didn't seem like LeBron like put him in a great spot. I mean, I almost kind of feel bad. It's like, how much are you driving all of this? And it's like a guy who's 19, like should have say over his life.
That's kind of the question right now is like, but at the same time, like Bronny's Twitter account's the one that's tweeting out all of the different college jerseys that he might commit to and like taunting the social media sphere to keep talking about his name. And whether that's marketing advice he's getting from professionals or not, this is all just really weird. He's a young kid. He's been complicit in all of it. And right now is using his dad's name and fame and basketball reputation to get a job in the NBA. So until we learn more or he gets away from his dad's specter, it's hard to divorce him from it regardless of what he says, because LeBron has also tried to distance himself from this now and say like, don't talk about my kid as much, like let him enjoy basketball, let him do his own thing. Buddy, you guys decided to go about this way. We're not ignorant. We're not going to pretend like you didn't all decide that this was the path. And, for better or worse, we're all seeing it play out. And it's very, very strange and unlike anything we've ever seen.
Yeah, and I think LeBron had that tweet that was like, Bronny's better than some of these cats right now, referring to players in the NBA. And I think LeBron has deleted that. Like, that's not helpful behavior at all.
But
that's all.
One caveat. Dude clearly loves his kid. Like he's an irrational sports dad, which is cool. Like this is like those guys at like the ballpark watching their kid and he hits like a double, but he was like 1 for 4 on the day on the baseball field, and they like think their kid's like going to be a travel ball player, going to get a college scholarship, and like it's that he's that, but like for an NBA prospect. So
There's I'm
it's
not gonna
fun.
say the kid's name, but there was this kid I used to play against in middle school who like went through puberty before everyone else, and he was like, I don't know, 6'3", great shooter in like 7th or 8th grade. And man, his dad was like, my kid is going to the league. And like when his kid was like 8th and 9th grade, and his son just ended up going in the military. He didn't even play college basketball.
I mean, look, that's it. Like that's it. Zion. LeBron is that at the NBA level where he is still competing. He just irrationally confident about his kid because he sees him put in the work, and hey, who can blame a dad, right?
All right, last big on our list, a guy you wanted to include on here, Tyler Smith. Tell me about Tyler Smith, Adam.
All right, Tyler Smith is one of the Ignite guys. A lot of questions about the Ignite program and whether or not Ignite is like set up the best for raising up these prospects right now.
What was the record last year?
I don't know. It was bad though. It was really bad. So him and Sar, Tyler Smith, Ron Holland is another one. I think Ron Holland is probably who I like the most off of Ignite. He's kind of a traditional wing, has a lot of skills, flashed a lot of stuff. But like these guys tend to diminish each other when they play for the Ignite. They don't get as much like individual attention and development of their own skill and exploration of their game. Like that's been like a theme that we keep running into a little bit. Tyler Smith, though, is a gigantic shooter. He is 6'11", and he is a 3-point shooter. And he is a really good 3-point shooter who shot like 36% when his 3-pointers were defended, and it's like close to 40, it's like 39.8 or something like that on all threes. He is a big time gigantic shooter. So people, you will hear him in like a conversation compared to, when people are getting reckless, it'll be like Lauri Markkanen. What's more reasonable probably is like Santi Aldama. But that profile is a thing that the Pelicans and others are all trying to hit on right now. Like that is an advantageous style of player. He has a lot of similar traits, tendencies, problems to a young Trey Murphy, but he's just already 6'11". He's already a little bit taller. So that's the kind of guy you hear him compared to. He is not a good defender. That is a huge development area. It's not that he can't and doesn't flash good defense. He does, but he's not consistent. That stuff's not consistent. The offensive tools and dribbling is not consistent. What is consistent is that he's really big and he can really shoot. So for the Pelicans to pick him, I think if you see people mock that, I think it's because of the valuing of Trey Murphy and what he's been and what they've been able to get him towards, and putting this guy on a similar path, but a little bit bigger. But I think he really tests the question, kind of alongside Ware and a little bit of like any consideration of Filipowski is like, how badly do you want to run 5 out? Because if you want to do it bad, if you want it badly, like this guy, he's a gargantuan player who can shoot threes. So if you want to work the opposite direction rather than the Larry, trying to work him out and play 5 out that way, I could see it. Like I can see that bet, but it's really got to come from that sphere. But he can shoot and he's huge.
The G League Ignite went 2-32, by the way. I looked it up.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
So Sam Presti with the Oklahoma City Thunder, he talks for like 2 hours at the end of the season. He'll just basically go as long as the reporters ask questions. David Griffin is generous about going on the record. I'm appreciative. But like, this year the Pelicans cut him off after like 20 minutes. That's standard, right? A lot of teams do that. Sam Presti will just talk for 2 hours. One of the things he said, basically, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but he's like, would I like to be a better defensive rebounding team? Yes. But I don't want to not be a top 5 offense too. Basically making the point of like, yeah, it's being a good 5-out team. That's hard. And like, creating this space in this environment where like our drivers have room to get to the rim. I don't want to just like bring in any old like lug and start him at center next to Chet. I like that point. So yes, 5 out is a cheat code, but you can't just plug anybody in there and do it. I love my guy Nicole O'Malley. Did not work out. That was the closest the Pelicans
You're gonna
got to
keep
being
bringing him
a
up, aren't you?
5 out team. I don't know why I do. Look, I think there's some interesting big options on the board. I don't know how many of these guys are gonna actually be there at 21, like Missi, as you said earlier, probably off the board. Ware's gonna be an interesting one. DaRon Holmes is like, I think, a guy you're gonna hear a lot of draft Twitter be like, I really like this guy. DaRon Holmes is interesting. Pelicans have liked experienced college players before. This is a weird draft. Pelicans are picking pretty late. We'll see.
Yeah, like if you get a role player here, if you get a rotation player, you won. Like that's we're needle in a haystack a little bit. Like these guys are really, really flawed. And from the guard perspective, like dark horses, like guys, if they fell, that I'd want to get into the guard conversation on. If for some reason Isaiah Collier gets really weird and falls like way down, I don't think he's gonna. I think he's gonna land. I think him and like Cody Williams are all gonna land like in the 10, 11, 12 spot. So this won't be a thing. But if either of those guys snuck out to us, like Cody Williams, Jalen Williams' brother, like hopefully somebody picks him before OKC does so that we don't all get laughed at next year when OKC has both of the brothers and he turns out to be a hell of a find too. And then we're like, oh, Presti's a genius who's better at this than all of us. Don't let that happen. Like Chicago, pick Cody Williams, please. Just don't let him go to Oklahoma City. I don't want to do it.
All right, let's finish up with a little of this Saints and Pelicans versus the LSED talk. This mini saga ended on Friday, and it very well might pick back up again. But basically, the development was on Friday, the Saints released a Q&A with Dennis Lauscha. Dennis Lauscha, I think his title is president of the Saints and Pelicans. He's effectively the CEO of the Benson organization. Like, Gail has the ultimate authority, but let's just be real. Like Dennis is really running the show here. He kind of runs this South Louisiana empire. It was a strange Q&A. I think like the big takeaway was the Saints admitted finally that yes, all of this was about the long-term lease that the Saints are negotiating with the state at the Superdome. The Saints did not come out and say that in their initial statement. So that was just strange that, hey, look, this happens at this LSED meeting on Wednesday. Then the Saints issue this statement and they just say, well, we didn't receive certain documentation, and they didn't say what it was about. It's really weird to release a statement and not address what the central issue was. So when they did this Q&A with Dennis Lauscha, they finally admitted what the central issue was about. It was about the long-term lease the Saints are negotiating with the state at the Superdome. The current one runs through 2030. There was like bizarre factual errors in there. I'll just read you this excerpt. Wednesday, while the LSCD had assembled much of the local media, it claimed the Saints have not paid construction bills since December. Can you explain? Dennis. Yes, I thought it was interesting to see the full media contingent at the LSCD meeting. That was a first. There was like 2 local media members there, and I know because I was one of them, and the Saints had a PR guy there. The Saints had a representative there. So either one of 2 things happened. This guy misreported the number of people who were there. I don't think that happened. Or the Saints just lied or misstated the number of people who were at the meeting. Like, it's one thing to kind of like fudge the truth on an issue where there's areas of gray. It's another to go on the record and be like, hey, we're correcting a lot of these truths. And by the way, we're not even going to get right the number of people who are at the meeting. It's a very black and white issue. There was 2 local media members at the meeting. It was a doozy.
Look, I'm gonna give my, we did kind of our interpretation of what was happening before this Q&A went down, and you may not say this, but I'm gonna say I think we nailed it. I think we kind of knew what it was about. We kind of had a feeling about how it was gonna go, and everything we talked about kind of happened. This Q&A was like So we have the certain documentation. We made fun of it on the last podcast. I wrote it on a piece of paper and I held it up because that's how much I believed there was actually documentation that was real, that was preventing payment. They clearly like started sliding down the road tactically on how to get the LSED to agree to the lease. Like they started off with, let's just paint them as crappy government who can't send invoices on time. Certain documentation was, those words were chosen to make you believe that like transactional documentation was flawed or missing, because who wouldn't believe that Louisiana government would struggle to do that? However, this is like well down the road in this relationship and in these payments. And like I pointed out on the last go round, that documentation and stuff like didn't just all of a sudden change in December in a way that wasn't doable. So that seemed really, really unlikely. So the other thing we said is like either they're requiring something frivolous or something that can't be delivered. You know what can't be delivered? An entirely separate contract. And that's the thing that they oddly kind of come out and admit in the Q&A.
Yeah,
They say
my question is why
outwardly,
not? Why didn't you guys just bring this up in your original statement? Like it looks like you're trying to obscure what the issue actually was. That to me, that's pretty suspicious that you don't actually come out and say what the issue is when you release a statement.
yeah, because the issue like would have been, you could have slam dunked on it from the jump, because you can't take a separate contract and then withhold payment for services already rendered that you are contractually obligated to pay, and then use that to extort the value of another contract. Like on its face, that's kind of silly. And they couched it in this Q&A in a way that like it's loaded with shots of the LACD and this allusion to like them changing terms at the last minute. There's a weird like self-serving statement that says, oh, the Saints out of the graciousness of their heart did not pursue enhanced terms from where we were. Like we just decided, like, because we're sweet and nice and don't take advantage of you, we're not going to pursue enhanced terms. Like the Q&A thing was entirely like to say Saints good, LSED bad. We had terms, we were almost agreed, and the LSED screwed the fans. And reality was like, hey guys, you just admitted that you tried to extort a contract from this board by not paying your bills. And how long is that going to fly?
Yeah, and I mean, we haven't said the most important part of all this. The Saints paid. Their outstanding amount was $11.4 million. They paid that on, I believe it was Thursday night, and the news did not become public until Friday afternoon. The Saints paid up. Stephanie Regal is a business reporter with the Times-Picayune. She followed the story, and I thought she did a really outstanding job. She got quotes from Shane Guidry, who is like an advisor to the governor, on the record, and I just thought this quote was telling of the state's perspective on the issue. Guidry said, "We cannot have a gun to our head saying we are not going to fund our portion of the renovation unless you give us the 10-year lease that we want. If it was all one contract tied together, fine. It's not. That is the issue to me. They agreed to pay a portion of the renovation of the Superdome so the Superdome could be renovated, and it is being renovated, and this lease is a separate issue, and I think that's what's going on, and that's my read of the situation and why they just paid up after they issued this weird statement Wednesday and didn't acknowledge what the issue actually was, and then did this Q&A with Dennis Lauscha on Friday, where one of the questions was, the media took every advantage to characterize Mrs. Benson and the Saints as either not having the money to complete their payments or simply delinquent. What is the deal? No, they didn't. The media, I was the one who wrote the story. They said they didn't pay. There's a huge difference between they didn't and they can't. Nobody ever reputable says they can't. They said they didn't, and they didn't.
Yeah, so this is the thing. This goes back to like, you're so sensitive about being perceived as cheap, but no one actually called her or you cheap. We think you're just doing something underhanded. Like, you have the money. No one doubts that. We think you're trying to make a power play, and it's coming off very weird, but it's so strange how like they kind of throw Gail into the crosshairs and say they're coming after her character, they're coming after her bank account. No, we know that her own like personal checking account doesn't fund these transactions. Like, you guys are crazy.
Yeah.
You guys
And
are like a
we
top
know,
20 valued franchise in the world. What
and
are we doing?
anybody with some sense knows like $11 million to the Benson empire is nothing. It's nothing. They have that on their couch cushions. That's not, $11 million. I mean, I know Gail is not Steve Ballmer, but with, as I said in the last episode, $60 billion of Microsoft stock, but like $11 million is nothing to them. That was never the issue.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, it was bizarre. And I think a window into kind of how things work here in a way that can maybe be uncomfortable. And look, I read a bunch of the old Lee stuff over the weekend. I also like checked out the biography of Tom Benson from the library and read that bad boy too. That's how I spent my Memorial Day weekend. I also jumped in a pool. But one of my takeaways is that I think that the Saints have historically gotten very good lease terms. Tom Benson is known as he was known as a very good negotiator, just compared to other pro sports franchises in the United States. And I think one of the ways that they were able to get pretty good team friendly lease terms was the state was sometimes worried about the threat of the Saints moving out of the state of Louisiana. And so the state just said, all right, whatever we got to do to keep the Saints. And I think the situation is different now because everyone understands the Saints aren't going anywhere. Gail Benson is 77 years old. This is about her legacy. She's gone on the record and says, like, I'm not even selling the Pelicans. Like, the Saints are the prized baby, obviously. And so I think that is part of the calculus that has changed. Everyone knows they're not moving this team out of Louisiana.
Yeah, they've lost their major point of leverage shifted. And so they tried to create a point of leverage to get one over and get the terms they want. And I think they just like the PR job around it is so sloppy that it feels like they made it very naked what they were trying to do, how they tried to do it. They just did kind of like the 90s version of PR on this and just made it very plainly clear that they tried a power play. It was kind of cheap and underhanded and silly, and they did it. And the question is why? And we knew why, lease extension. And now they just came out and said it to 2040. They're under contract till 2030. They already had agreed to this renovation. They were already paying the bills. It's funny. They even threw in there, oh, we paid a bill in March. So like, we're not paying them. What? So you're admitting that you're withholding, but we're not withholding as much as you think. Okay. It's just it was really strange. It was really useless. It was to try to hammer through lease terms. And it's just like, what are we telling you about them? Like nothing we haven't told you before. This is how like business power plays happen. We're not like accusing Gail of anything or saying that she's cheap. Business people that run businesses try to win any way they can. And it can sometimes be like sport for them. I don't know if that's what this was, but it may very well have been that this was like a way to try and win the issue and then go tell Gail, hey, look at the terms we got. And I think it just got a little too public and a little too nasty too quick because this was weird and stupid and messy. And clearly we had a phone call from Jeff Landry and Gail, and this very, very quickly got put to bed. And then we got Not on Herb Day right after. It just felt like if there's a governor we've ever had that could not afford to have a fight with a NFL football team that is beloved in the city, now's probably the time. So like perception for both of them wasn't really going good. Nobody was winning. So it's just like, pay the bill. Let's move on. And of course, the Saints, like in more sloppy PR, sent the same text to like all of the reporters, and they all tweeted it out at the same time saying the Saints received certain assurances and that is why they paid. And it all got tweeted out at exactly the same time. Like, can we at least like give guys different verbiage, please? So that it like at least looks like a little believable.
The best proof yet that we're living in a simulation was Governor Landry's official account tweeting at Retro Pels, hit the anthem.
Oh, brother. The hat, he had the hat too. You saw he had the Not on Herb hat.
Yeah, I saw
The
it.
one that looks like Bass Pro Shops. Oh, buddy.
Yeah, I think
Buddy,
it was a Joel Van Isle hat.
yeah.
Shout out Retro Pels. Shout out Joel Van Isle.
Yeah, our
Shout out Herb
guys.
Jones, man. Herb Jones, one of my favorite players ever cover. A guy who does things the right way. A person who deserved his own day. If anybody did, Herb Jones did.
Hell yeah. Congratulations on first team all defense. Obviously, we have all known, we have all believed. And if we can find anybody close to, half of a Herb Jones at the 21st pick, we will have done a good job.
All right, guys, we will continue to talk draft in the next few weeks. We'll continue to talk trade scenarios. There is a lot going on in Pelicans land. James Borrego got ran up by TMZ at LAX today when he was interviewing for the Lakers job. That's a real thing that happened. We will get all into all of this stuff in June. Appreciate you listening. We'll talk again soon, Adam.